How do you get melty, delicious queso without it being too boring, too one-dimensional? It's just creamy, it's just cheesy, and have it stick together without breaking? Well, I'm gonna show you how to do just that on this episode of Self-Serving Skillet. So this is gonna involve a little bit of math, but don't worry, I'm gonna do the math with you. It's not gonna be that hard, and we all have calculators just right in our pockets. You wanna start out with a brick of cheese. And I say a brick of cheese because you don't want pre-shredded cheese with this. Pre-shredded cheese will have a coating, a powder coating on the outside so it doesn't stick back together. Guess what that means for your queso when you go to melt it in the milk? It's not gonna melt right, and it's not gonna be a cohesive queso. It's gonna be gloppy and glumpy and gloopy and all those other G words I just made up. And I like to turn my cheese grater on its side. I find that pushing the cheese rather than pulling the cheese down, I get a lot less knuckle sandwiches that way, and it really lets me kind of control the cheese a little bit better. You do want a mild cheese with this, something that's a little bit softer but still firm enough to run through that cheese grater, and I'm gonna use the smallest setting that lets the cheese stay together, because that's going to greatly take down our work a little bit later on when we're trying to melt all this cheese. I've gotten this to work with something like a sharp cheddar, something that's a little bit more firm and flavorful, but it makes a really rich cheese sauce. If you're gonna go that route, you do need to spend a lot more time at the stove, maybe with a little bit lower heat, and just add it in so slowly to get it to melt. And then that's all getting weighed, and I'm using grams here because a gram is a smaller unit than an ounce. You could use ounces and do fractions, but we're already gonna be working with decimals later on, so let's keep the math simple for now. So we have 431 grams of cheese, and I'm gonna round that down just for easy math to 430, and we want 93% liquid. So times 0.93, all the math, we get up to really close to 400. We're just gonna go 400 for easy math. So I want 400 grams of milk in this case. And then I'm gonna move over to my sodium citrate. I only want 4% sodium citrate, so 100% is the cheese. 430 times 0.04, that's gonna get us just over 17 grams, round down to 17. Easy math. We're gonna get the milk and the sodium citrate into a cold pan and whisk to dissolve. Once that's dissolved, we can start to add our heat. Over a medium heat, you're gonna keep whisking this until it gets steamy, until you start to see a little bit of steam. You don't want to see any boiling. You want this just hot enough to steam. And when it's hot enough to steam, go ahead and sprinkle in a little bit of cheese. A little bit of cheese is gonna inform this what it's supposed to be doing. And you want it to be completely dissolved before you add a little bit more. And each time you can add a little bit more, a little bit faster. So by the time you're almost done, you're gonna be adding handfuls at a time, 20 seconds apart. The first couple times I made this, it was all over the place. Sometimes I'd have a perfect cheese sauce, and sometimes I would get nothing but clumps and I would break the sauce. That's when the protein all jumbles together. But that's before I discovered sodium citrate. And what sodium citrate does is it makes the proteins a little bit more soluble so they can blend into everything a little bit easier, and it also lowers the pH of the entire mix so it stays nice and creamy and everything blends together and it doesn't separate. This is also found naturally in fruits, in citrus fruits. Another name for sodium citrate is sodium of citric acid. You can actually make this at home with some salt and some lemon juice, and if you want a demonstration of how to do that, let me know in the comments below and I'll make that video. I also want to thank new Patreon supporter Judith. Judith, you're locked in at the chicken egg level, so you get all of this content ad-free and a day early on Patreon, but at any level, Patreon supporters of any level get all of this content ad-free as long as you watch it through Patreon. And when you're done, when everything is equally sort of homogenized and incorporated into this lovely velvety queso, I want to take it a step further, because to me, it's a little boring. Now, I'll explain what I mean. I love chocolate. Chocolate is probably one of my favorite things, but it needs a little help. It needs some nuts, it needs some puffed rice, it needs some caramel, it needs some other textures and flavors to really let it shine. I'll order the chocolate dessert off of any menu before I even look at any of the other desserts, but if it doesn't have something else with it, well, you just missed a golden opportunity. So this queso is just very creamy and delicious. It's gonna have the flavor of the cheese a little bit muted by the milk, but I need some acid. So what I'm gonna go in with are some pickled jalapenos, and I'm just gonna give those a rough chop one way and a rough chop the other way, and dump those in, mix them in, get it into the container that I want to serve in, and we are ready for some absolutely delicious chips and queso. All right, we have this melty, creamy queso. Let's give this a try here. Those pickled jalapenos just take it to the next level. Just give it a little bit of an acid kick. Just give it a little bit of a spicy kick, so I'm not just eating cheese and chips, which is great anyway. This is just kind of some next level stuff. If you like sauces and dips, I made this pico de gallo a couple weeks ago that was out of this world, and then last week we made this guacamole, all with those chips that we made together on Patreon. That link is in the description below. Get in the kitchen and make something amazing, and I'll see you next week.